Hi, this is actually future Michael coming in to say that this discussion was actually longer than I expected it to be, so we broke it into 2 parts. Our third technique is pedal tones. A pedal tone is a note that is held or repeated while the chords or melody around it move. The term comes from the fact that organists would use the feet pedals in order to create a sustained tone with their foot and then play other things on top of it, hence pedal tone. Now, pedal tones have a lot of various uses. The biggest one to my mind is that it creates a sense of stability for the ear even as you do wild and crazy things. Something else that's also really nice about pedal tones is that they can both create tension and break tension just by their mere existence. You can also get drone-like effects. The difference between the drone and the pedal tone is that drones don't usually resolve in any way, but pedal tones usually do. They're not as long-lasting as a drone. Now, places in the scale that we usually use for a pedal tone are either the 1 or the 5, or you can create a double pedal tone, and you can use both the 1 and the 5 together and just pedal those out. Also, Sondheim once said, and I think he was a very smart cookie for saying such, that audiences will pretty much buy anything that you put over a pedal tone because of what it provides in terms of both stability and tension release, and that is something that I really like about pedal tones. I like to use them when I want to create stability with a lot of tension, because really, if you establish a pedal, you can pretty much do anything over it. Right? And then there's some sort of tension already built in while there's a groundedness and you expect some sort of release, right? Or wherever I landed last time could release somewhere else, right? It's either a 1 or a 5 in the pedal tone, which can help tell the ear where we're headed next. They're so fun. Now, some songs very famously have used pedal tones, even in pop music. One could... Yeah, a little jump, right? I mean, that pedal tone in the intro helps provide a sense of like excitement and anticipation because it's there, it's grounding us, and it's got this tension release thing happening with the chords as they shift around, and all we want is for the song to like crack open, and then we're all dancing on the floor of whoever's wedding it is, and it's a great time, and everyone's singing way too loud, blowing out their voices. Never been there. Technique number 4, chord substitutions. This is a technique where you take one chord in a chord progression and you swap it out for a different one that has a similar function to the original chord. Often, the substituted chord contains similar notes, or at least a couple similar notes to the original chord, but helps create better voice leading. The substitution can also create more interest on the ear of the listener instead of the original chord, which may have been one that the ear was expecting. Now, I also just want to say that these are very common in jazz music, and don't forget, friends, jazz is one of the foundational sounds of musical theater. Now, we have a whole bunch of different kinds of substitutions, and I'm just gonna kind of move through them as quickly as I can. Here we go! First and foremost, we have diatonic substitutions. Honestly, we were already kind of doing this earlier, but now we would do it as a replacement of a chord that already exists inside a progression. For instance, your major 1 chord could suddenly become a minor 6 chord. As we saw, they're heavily related. Or you can take that major 1 and make it a minor 3 instead. That's a great diatonic substitution. And if you notice, if you go to either one of those chords, but you keep all of the notes of the C major chord in it, you're creating a 7 chord, right? 7 chords. This is standard 7, this is a major 7. And this is part of the reason that a 6 and a 3 work really well as substitutions. Now you can do that exact same thing with 7 chords as well. So let's say instead of a C major, you have a C major 7 here. And so now we're going to make essentially an A minor 9 by adding the A. Or we are going to now make a C9 by going and adding the 7th of what would be that E7 chord, but keeping the C. Right, you can keep going with this. It's a lot of fun. Anyway, diatonic substitutions. Play around. Now, what about a tritone substitution? So for a tritone substitution, instead of using your dominant 7 chord, so your 5-7 chord, instead you are going to substitute that out for a different dominant 7 chord that is a tritone away. For those of you who are not aware, the tritone is 6 half steps in difference, which is also known as the augmented 4 or the diminished 5. It's taking an octave and you're splitting it in half, right? So from a C to an F sharp is a tritone. Once upon a time, it was called the devil's chord, which is so silly because it's not a chord, it's an interval. I don't think the devil's there. I don't think. Now, these substitutions work because they contain the same guide tones as the original dominant 7 chord. The guide tones here are going to be the 3rd of the chord and the 7th of the chord. So if we were to look at this practically, let's say our dominant 7 chord here was a C7. We've got our C, E, G, and our B flat. Now, a tritone away there, as we said, was F sharp. I'm gonna actually put it into G flat for this example. So instead of starting on our C, we're gonna start a tritone away on G flat. And we're going to build the chord. What do we have? We have G flat, B flat. Oh, there's that one note already. We have our D flat, and then we have really F flat here, which equals E. Right? So we have the B flat and the E, just like we had the B flat and the E. Functionally, because of the guide tones, they work similarly. The only difference there is that the 3rd and the 7th have swapped places. So the E was the 3rd in the C7 chord, but becomes the 7 in the G flat 7 chord, and vice versa for the B flat. Now, a tritone substitution can be applied many different ways, but there is a very common way to do it. Instead of going from your 2 chord to your 5-7 chord, so 2 chord to 5-7, and then to 1, right? We all know that. That sounds familiar. Instead, we're going to take that 5-7, that dominant 7, we're going to switch it out for our flat 2 as a 7 chord, which means we're going to be going here. Right? Ooh, isn't that nice? Much jazzier, yes? Our next substitution is going to be secondary dominant. We've talked about dominant a lot already, but now secondary ones. Instead of using a fully diatonic progression, we can create a cascade of dominant 7 chords, each making it feel like the next chord is going to be a new tonic. It's kind of fun and weird. Okay, instead of doing, for instance, let's say, assume we're in C major here, a 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Which does sound like a very particular pop song from my youth. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to turn each of those into a dominant 7 chord. So there's not going to be any minor chords in here. They're all going to be a major chord, and they're going to treat the next one as though it is also a major tonic. It's going to feel weird. So like I said, we had 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Why did I choose those? Because they're each a 4th away from each other, right? And that's what it's going to require if we're going to treat these like dominant 7s. So now we are going to make that 3 major and add a 7. Okay. Now, instead of going to an A minor, we're going to go to an A7, to a D7, to a G7, and then finally back to our C. Ooh, that's fun and spicy. Why even do this? Well, adding secondary dominants can be a lot of fun and create that delightful cascade on the ears. But it can also really help with things like, oh, I don't know, voice leading. Remember technique number 1? In addition, it creates a lot of very fun textures that you can play with, which of course helps make things sound jazzy, helps make things also sound a little bit surprising when you want them to. Not to mention, we see this a lot in classical musical theater, like a lot. That brings us to diminished substitutions. You didn't think there'd be so many substitutions, did you? Here we go. Now, this will probably not shock you for those of you who have music theory knowledge, but the diminished substitution is going to substitute out the dominant 7 chord. A lot of this has to do with dominant 7s. So instead of using our 5-7 chord, our G7 chord, we're going to instead substitute in a diminished 7 to resolve to the 1 chord instead. Very similar function, but slightly different, slightly spicier. Honestly, that is great for chromatic voice leading. Depending on what your progression's doing, that can be a really nice way to resolve. It doesn't feel like you have relied on the 5-7 and forced your way to it. And the last of the substitutions we're going to talk about is the minor key modal interchange. Essentially, what this means is borrowing a chord from the key center's minor version instead. So if we are in C major, we know what our chords are in C major, but we're going to instead borrow from the minor, the C minor key. Just a little exchange, just a little borrow. It's fine. Another common one here is to substitute out the dominant 7 of the major key instead for the 7 of the minor key as a dominant 7 instead. So, okay, so instead of, we're here in C major, we expect that to be a G7 chord to come home, right? Instead, we're going to borrow the 7-7 of the minor key. So the 7 being a B flat here, because it's a flat 7. And that leads us home in a very different way, but in a way that probably feels familiar to our ears. It's pretty common. And honestly, there are a lot of options here, so I ask you to just play around, see what you can substitute out, taking from the minor key into the major. It's a lot of fun. Now, this discussion today may have been a bit much if you do not know yet the essential foundations of music theory, and if you want to learn more about that or revisit some of the key concepts, then you should watch this video next. Otherwise, thank you all for being here with me today, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers!